It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
Hello and welcome. He is Gary McNamara. I'm Eric Harley as we begin a Friday. Gary, good morning. How are you?
I'm not ready.
Yeah.
There's too much going on. Oh, man. What a day, huh?
Yeah. Big day. A lot of interesting decisions. One decision coming down from the Supreme Court.
You mean the MAGA court?
Yeah, the MAGA court, Schumer calls it.
The MAGA court, 9-0 decision.
You notice how they're back to that. The MAGA Republicans, the MAGA court, the MAGA-controlled House of Representatives. Heard that the other day. Yeah. Supreme Court, interesting decision. Part of their decision was unanimous, 9-0 for the plaintiffs, and it has to do with WOTUS, the waters of the United States. What's interesting is that on defining a waterway, it was split. It was 5-4.
Right.
And so when you look at what they looked at is this landowner had built near these waters and these wetlands, and they were being fined $40,000 a day until they returned the land to the wetlands condition. They had to go back and undo it, according to the EPA. And so they took their case to court. That part of the decision, SCOTUS said, no, you don't get to do that. So they went back and on that, it was 9-0 unanimous.
But here's what I took from that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm wrong, but my first indication of it from my initial reading was what they all said was I think it was the Sackets. Right?
Yeah.
It reminded me of the Western series in the 70s.
Yeah.
But they all sided with the Sackets, saying this is wrong what they're doing.
Yeah.
Now, when it came to what the authority should be, they differed. But that just showed me, well, then that needs to go to Congress. But the fact that they all agreed that currently what they were doing in the Sackets case was wrong, which then to me screams for, okay, Congress needs to be more specific on any type of regulation like this.
Right. Well, and on top of, and I think part of it too, going after them, with the $40,000 a day, telling them to return the land to its original condition and that kind of thing. I think the court saw it as overreach. But, yeah, I do agree. I think that, eventually it's going to be like with a lot of administrative regulation. There has been a calling to fix this. There was during the Trump years. This WOTUS thing started during the Obama administration. It started ramping up during the Obama administration. I have a longtime friend who was affected by it. They eventually, when Trump came into office, the Army Corps of Engineers came back in and fixed his problem retroactively and said, no, the regulation is no longer in effect. And so they were able to, he was going to, again, he was looking at massive fines for not returning that land back to what it was, and it wasn't wetlands. It was a different thing that pertained to WOTUS. And here's really the idea. And this is why the 5-4 split is interesting on defining a waterway. If you have a culvert that is mostly dry, a culvert is defined by two areas of land that are high and then one land in the center, one area of land in the center that is lower. It's a ditch or any low area that would essentially facilitate water flowing off of your property if it rains. Well, the EPA came in and said, nope, we get to control that, even if water isn't there 99% of the time. Well, no, you don't. You absolutely do not. Now, states have come in and said, we're going to control what you can put on that land if you're going to treat it with, pesticides and herbicides and everything else. We're going to come in and we're going to control what you can, how that water is managed or how that land is managed. It will be interesting to see if Congress decides to take this up. Because essentially it is a land grab. If the federal government can come in and say, we control your land because you have a low spot in your land. Well, what about the areas that have, like my house sits on top of my property and it slopes. All the water runs off and runs down the street. Not all the water, but I mean, water does run off of my property and runs down the street. That's the case for I don't know how many homes in America.
Well, my backyard is slants down towards the pond.
Yeah.
The pond eventually goes to an Army Corps of Engineer lake.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, how much control does the federal government have over my property?
Yeah, that's it.
And what I do with the water that comes, out of it. Now, let's put it this way: if water splashes out of my pool,
mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's serious. I mean, it's not like oh, don't be ridiculous. Well, it's the federal government that's being ridiculous. But I think the other thing that needs to be talked about here, it's not just the federal government, it's the way that the administrative state, and it's across the board. I saw, who was it? I forget if it was Jim Jordan or whatever. Yeah, or no, it was Comer talking about how, the FBI won't give them what they need. And when you look across the board, this is, and it's the same thing. We can go with the Supreme Court. It's the MAGA Supreme Court. It was a 9-0 decision. They may have disagreed on what the authority of the EPA is and what the solution should be, but that's up to Congress.
Right.
And so what you have here is look at how many things, when you look at what happened with COVID. Yeah. And the rules that that were not congressionally approved, whether it was the eviction eviction mandate, yes,
eviction moratorium,
the eviction moratorium mandate, the vaccine mandate, all these things. None of this came from Congress. And when I saw, I think it was Jim Jordan talking about the FBI not giving them, for example, the unclassified material that they have. It says, we have oversight. We're the elected representatives of the people.
Mm-hmm.
And across the board, what you see from Democrats, for the most part, I'm not saying it never happens from Republicans, but if you look at almost every issue that we're dealing with, the majority of issues we're dealing with right now, so many of them are the Democrats saying, well, we want the bureaucrats to make the decision. We don't want Congress to do it on the debt ceiling. I mean, it goes across the board on the debt ceiling.
Yeah,
the Democrats in the Senate. We've been home for we've been home for a while. We're not even worrying about it. When the process is supposed to be, the Republicans are supposed to come up with their plan. The Democrats can come up with their plan. They go to conference. But we've gotten to the point where the executive branch that doesn't make law is doing the negotiations. The president is doing the negotiation for the Democrat Senate. And then the Democrats go, well, we don't even want to be about, if this doesn't work out, if the executive branch that isn't supposed to be making law is negotiating with the House and that doesn't work out, well, we, the Democrats in the Senate, say, well, then go to the 14th Amendment and interpret it any way you want. So the executive branch that doesn't have the authority to do this will do it. And across the board, whether it's the MAGA 9-0 ruling or the debt ceiling or what's going on in the FBI or what happened during COVID, so much of it is the Democrats wanting the bureaucrats, the administrative state, to actually control and make new law.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that got me yesterday. I'm like, man, it's across the board. So
it's, basically what the court was saying on WOTUS was, you can't go this far as you did in this case. but we're split on how far you can go.
Right. Well,
which that means it's got to go to Capitol Hill.
Got to go to Capitol Hill. Right. Exactly. That's where that is what is supposed to solve the problem. And then if the Congress goes too far, then for example, on property rights, that's where the Supreme Court would come in, or the federal courts would come in at that moment, as they actually did here. All right, you ready for this audio cut?
What do you got?
I want to play this because this is, we talk about the debt ceiling, and this is, you want a perfect example of what we have stated, what's going on here.
Yeah,
and this is where it's you see everywhere the debt ceiling talks going to a critical stage, and then Biden heads off for the weekend.
Yeah,
I'm heading off for the weekend. And I saw the one story that said Democratic leader furious that Biden is just heading out of town. And then we talked about it yesterday, Democrats saying the president needs to be talking about this. McCarthy's there every single day talking about it. And because McCarthy is talking about it every day and the president isn't there, the Republicans sound reasonable.
Yeah.
that was my favorite from yesterday's show. And we said, well, look, what's going on here? The media is going crazy, too, the liberal media, because McCarthy's out there every day. You see the polling on the actual debt ceiling and what we should do. The majority of Americans side with the Republicans right now, and Biden isn't talking about it. Well, this is from MSNBC, Biden Communications Director Ben LaBolt on there. Just listen to the pushback that he is getting. He's like, well, the president has talked about it. You hear from him once a week.
Yeah.
And they're like, McCarthy's out there 5 times a day. And they're livid because they're not getting their talking points from the White House.
Yeah.
The political activists in the mainstream media are upset. They're not being told what to say. And they're upset about it. Here we go.
They don't have their talking points.
Yeah, here we go. This is just great.
Why have we heard so much from Kevin McCarthy and his lieutenants on this? We hear from them multiple times a day, and we've heard so little directly from the president, directly from the White House. I know you're on today. We appreciate it. Why aren't we hearing every day from the president at length, talking to reporters or out in the stump, talking about how this is a bad idea to default? I mean, if you just watch television or read any newspaper or newsletter, you'll see a ton from Republicans and from some Democratic lawmakers, and not so much from the White House other than memos.
We're focused on driving towards an outcome here, Katie, and I don't think that's wholly accurate. You've heard from the president in this discussion beginning March 9th. He's been out there at least once a week on this. He held
Kevin
a full
McCarthy's
press
out there
conference
multiple times a day. He's out there once a week. That's the disparity.
He's a member of Congress, right? Members of Congress hold press conferences multiple times a day.
The president has a few steps to walk over to the press briefing room and a number of reporters. Every time he walks to leave the White House, he walks by reporters.
I don't think that would be helpful in driving towards an outcome in the negotiations, Katie. You need.
And there you go. I mean, that's the problem that's going on right now. And you see the pushing back is just, amazing. Well, he's out there once a week, but they're out there because they're going crazy because they see what's happening. And as I said, the one quote I saw yesterday from a Democratic lawmaker, the president isn't out there. Remember, McCarthy is doing. They have negotiators in there, but McCarthy is the head of the negotiations for the Republicans. Biden is the head of the negotiations for the Democrats.
Yeah.
And he's not around.
Right.
It's just, it is hilarious right now. And they're just freaking out.
And what's interesting is typically we would be hearing what? We would be hearing that McCarthy is in negotiations first with Schumer. But the Democrats in the Senate have done nothing.
No.
They're out. It's as if the Senate has no role and we'll just hand it off over to the White House.
Right. And that was brought up last week by multiple news agencies saying, wow, the Democrats in the Senate are saying we have no business being involved in this. We're just going to give it to the president to do it.
Right.
We're not going to get involved in this whatsoever. They're basically handing over their constitutional duty to the executive branch that really has no business being involved, in the negotiations. Congress is supposed to do this, and they've just basically said, make us irrelevant.
Yeah.
We're not even a part. We're Democrats
as if
in the
we
Senate.
have nothing to do with it.
But it's just, I'm telling you, this is just great. That pushback, that's the Katie Turner on MSNBC, and it's like they don't know what to do because they know, number one, Biden can't sell any of this. There was the talk that the Democrats were screaming the president needs to do a prime time. He needs to be talking about this all the time. He needs to be out there, do a prime. And as I said, well, it would have to be by Thursday because Friday everybody's gone.
Right.
Today, by noon today, and nobody's pays attention to the media, the average person, they may watch the nightly news, but they won't. Everybody's gone on vacation.
Yeah, I told you in the pre-show meeting, I've been wondering for a couple of days if their play is to just concede. The White House just kind of concedes over the weekend. We've come to terms on a deal and then just leave it there because Memorial Day weekend, nobody's paying attention. They're not watching the news.
A Friday night deal at midnight.
Yeah, or Saturday morning, right? Just send it across, float it across Saturday morning. Yeah.
We got a great show ahead, 866-90-RED-EYE.
Logging miles during the hot summer months can put a serious strain on you and your truck's health. Did you know pollutants and allergens in the air outside can enter your cab through the HVAC system without you even cracking a window? That's why it's important to check those cabin air filters. Not only do dirty cabin air filters contaminate the air you breathe, they can also cause major damage to HVAC components like blower motor resistors and AC compressors. Have your cabin air filter serviced if you notice less airflow than usual coming from the interior vents. This is a common sign that your filters are at the end of their life cycle. Breathe easy when the air in your cab is fresh. This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Friday Radio. It's Idiot Friday. He's Eric Harley. I'm Gary McNamara. I just thought of that because I was just looking at the headline. Target CEO defends Pride display adjustments while vowing LGBTQ support.
Can't have it both ways.
And then says, this has been a very hard day.
Yeah.
And I'm just like shaking my head saying, you need to be fired right now.
Because now you've alienated both sides.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is exactly what we have said. There was no way you weren't going to do that in the end. With every situation, that's exactly what happens. It doesn't matter who you are. Colin Kaepernick is still angry that he's not playing football. But there is no... think about that. They all, remember all the teams were going to show unity. And they all decided to take a knee before the national anthem, which is pretty much, if you think about it, it's like, well, you're still sending the same message. Mm-hmm. That's the idea. You're doing it because he did it, and he did it for this reason. Then you're doing it for the same reason. Well, there was no way out of that when Black Lives Matter came along, and then remember after that first season, the NBA at the end of the season, NBA commissioner says, well, they will not have as much of a prominent place. Yeah, basically, we're backing out of this.
And that was a story out yesterday, black activists running from Black Lives Matter.
Right. They don't want to be associated with them as the organization implodes, but it was always going to end this way. Mm-hmm. You're not going to appease.
The Bonus Show.
It's Friday Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. All right, the debate in the House of Representatives over the debt limit continued yesterday. We'll hear audio from AOC and then Chip Roy countering what she had to say. Chip Roy from Texas.
They are accusing Democrats of saying we spend too much. For anyone that wants to entertain that thought, I ask you to think about the last time a person has said in this country that the government does too much for them, that their Social Security check was too high, that teachers are paid too much. When was the last time anyone has heard or seen that?
Another quote. President Biden already lowered the deficit by $1.7 trillion. They say his budget would cut the deficit by another $3 trillion by eliminating wasteful spending on big oil and pharma, we're told. But it is in fact our Democratic colleagues who prefer to maintain their massive subsidies for the elites and the wealthy in their so-called Inflation Reduction Act just last year. My friend from New York, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, said, quote, I ask you, think about the last time a person has said in this country that the government does too much for them. When was the last time anyone has heard or seen that? I'll say it. I'll say it right here. I don't want the government doing most of the things that the government is doing to interfere with the ability of the American people to carry out their lives. Federal, state, and local. When was the last time you had a bureaucrat show up and you said, oh joy, thank you, I'm really glad there's a bureaucrat here? When was the last time you were thankful for $32 trillion in debt, $100,000 almost for every man, woman, and child in America? Anybody thankful for $32 trillion in debt? Anybody? Anybody thankful for a border that's wide open being exploited by cartels while fentanyl comes in and kills our children? Everybody thankful for that Department of Homeland Security that doesn't actually secure the homeland? Everybody thankful for an FBI that went after Scott Smith and labeled him a domestic terrorist for daring to defend his daughter in a school board meeting because she was assaulted in a bathroom? Anybody thankful for the IRS knocking on your door, auditing the poor and the minorities 3 to 5 times more? People thankful for that? Are you thankful for the EPA or the Department of Interior that sent a man to prison because he had some ponds on his ranch in Montana? We have a government that is weaponized against the American people and is undermining our liberties, and they want more of it.
Interesting that a narrative that I've seen in the last couple of weeks, Eric, from the Republicans, and that's number one, attacking the subsidies for the rich and elite. And when they say that you notice that Democrats don't respond to that and say that's not true, because they're talking about the electric vehicle subsidies, which, again, the average person does not buy an electric vehicle. Those subsidies are going to the well-off. And so that is interesting. And the other one was that he just said there, let me just go back here. Let me just start this here again. I want to just refresh my memory here. If you could put it up, thank you.
Joy. Thank you. I'm really glad there's a bureaucrat here. When was the last time you were thankful for $32 trillion in debt, $100,000 almost for every man, woman, and child in America? Anybody thankful for $32 trillion in debt? Anybody? Anybody thankful for a border that's wide open being exploited by cartels while fentanyl comes in and kills our children? Everybody thankful for that Department of Homeland Security that doesn't actually secure the homeland? Everybody thankful for an FBI that went after Scott Smith and labeled him a domestic terrorist for daring to defend his daughter in a school board meeting because she was assaulted in a bathroom? Anybody thankful for the IRS knocking on your door, auditing the poor and the minorities 3 to 5 times more?
That's it right there. The one with that's the one the Republicans have been pounding that the last couple of weeks. And so there is an effort from the Republican Party to portray in specific legislation and statistics from the IRS, both the fact that the IRS and the 80,000 will be going after, because remember, they said they were going to go after the millionaires. And the immediate thing was, no, you're not going after the millionaires.
No.
You're going after the people that may work under the table. The people that work under the table are not millionaires. The people that work under the table are probably the middle class, or actually the lower middle class that are actually doing it. And then they find out that the audits, because of that, are mostly the poor and minorities at that particular point.
Right.
Exactly. And so they had to sell it. We said the Democrats had to sell it. And look, we believe everybody should pay their taxes. But they know the problem. Democrats knew the problem with that because they said the 80,000 agents are to go after the rich. And we said the rich are being audited all the time.
Right.
They're not going after the rich.
Right.
They're going after the poor and people that have unreported income. And you saw it with the whole $600 thing that they put into effect.
And now they're monitoring all the money apps.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I noticed that a couple of my banks changed the amount of what they would allow you to send or receive. And they lowered it greatly. And while I haven't been told for sure, it's not a coincidence, in my opinion, that it happened on the heels of all this conversation about people, and they wanted to monitor that. That's the part. They talked about that, too. Not just a $600 deposit, but sending money back and forth.
Right.
Because a lot of people will I've paid contractors by sending money. In fact, I'll do it again on Friday, by sending money to them. What they report to the IRS is none of my business. But the point is that this administration and the Treasury Department, the Treasury Secretary, is not coming out and talking about, and they could say it. There's too much unreported income, which means too much of this money flow is, because that's what they're saying. Too much of this money flow is just going untaxed.
But be honest with the American people.
Say it.
Don't lie and say you're going after the millionaires and the rich when you're actually going after a significant portion of is the lower middle class.
And the reason they can't say it is because over the years, conservatives have said, look, the tax system, look at who pays taxes and who doesn't. Now, we're far past that now. Who was it, Rick Scott, that wanted to bring up the changing the tax situation during the midterm elections, and we were like, dude, that's not going to work. We may agree with you, but that's not going to work politically. That you're not going to get anywhere with that kind of approach. But if this administration came out and said more people need to be paying their share of taxes, see, they've been getting away with the billionaires need to be paying their fair share, and they can't, and that's why they use billionaires and millionaires in this whole $600 thing.
How do you work? How does a Republican work that? If I'm a Republican strategist, what I need to do, I would say you need to find out a way to put into your narrative that the Democrats are going after the poor to ensure that they pay their fair share.
That's exactly what's going on. And if they
claim they're going after the rich,
right,
for their fair share, but they're not. They're lying to you. They're going after the poor.
Well, and here's the thing. Because they've been getting away with it for so long, and putting it on the backs of the rich. Well, they're not paying enough in taxes. Well, but we've been watching it. Conservatives know what they've been doing. They impose taxes on the lower and middle class. How? Well, by taxing corporations. That's a hidden tax. The corporate tax is passed along to you. Everybody pays it. There is you don't get to go back and say, well, how much did you give to corporations at the end of the year when you're doing your tax return? And if you're below a certain income, you get some of that back. It doesn't work that way. So they love the hidden tax. And in this case, they're trying to hide the real reason as to why they want to go after people. I think people understand. Look, working under the table is illegal. You have to report all of your income. But then you get down to my daughter babysat for our next door neighbor the other night and for an hour and made $20. Does my daughter need to file taxes on that? And the answer would be yes.
Mm-hmm.
But politically, you can't say that out loud, which is why they're trying to say, well, these millionaires with their $600 deposits.
No,
that's insane. $600. That's not a million. That's not they're not going to be a millionaire for long if their deposits are only 600.
All we're asking for is the truth. Say we're going after the poor and the middle class.
Yes.
And when you do corporate taxes, don't lie to the American public.
Right.
Don't say you're punishing the corporations.
Right.
Let the American public know that it's a stealth tax
right.
that hurts the poor the most.
Because, and then say out loud, this is a liberal administration that would need to say out loud that everybody needs to pay their fair share.
Yes.
They can't say that.
Because that's what
what they're doing.
What the Democrats are doing is saying everybody, including the poor and the middle class, need to pay their fair share because they're not, and that's why we need these 80,000 IRS agents.
Yeah.
And that's why we want to increase corporate taxes.
Right.
Because if we increase corporate taxes, the vast majority of the money coming in from corporate taxes will come from the middle class and the poor.
Exactly.
Tell us where we're wrong, Democrats. You can't.
It is so clear to anybody who's paying attention.
That's why I find, the last couple of weeks they've been pounding both of those.
Yeah.
Both of those things. Number one, that and it's the rich that are getting the subsidies for electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Why are we doing that? Why are we paying for part of the cost of an electric vehicle for the rich?
Right.
Oh, did you see that thing on? I think National Review had that thing about electric trucks. The trucks that they want, in California, that need to by 2026 near the ports be running.
Yeah.
And man, some great talking. We'll have that coming up. Some great talking points on that one, saying, "What are you doing?" And there was another article that they wrote. The Democrats are trying to destroy everything that works.
Well, no. Here's the thing. On the port trucks, they've been doing this for a long time. These are the big rigs that essentially unload, that cargo, load that cargo, and everything else. So in those port trucks, there was an aging fleet for a long time. Then California came in, and then they updated their regulations, and now they've moved to a mandate coming up on for EVs. They want all electric trucks in the ports. Well, now you think about the cost of doing that. By the way, the bogus number they were trying to float out there. Well, this will save those trucking companies. I forget what the number was, but billions of dollars collectively. Are you kidding me?
No, it's not.
Have you seen the price of these vehicles?
Yeah.
And so
twice what a normal truck is.
Yeah.
And because the trucks are so heavy, they're going to they estimated need double the amount of trucks to do it.
Exactly, because they're not going to have the same towing capacity or the same freight capacity. They're not going to be able to legally haul the same amount of freight. So then you look at it and say, all right, yeah, what's the other problem? Well, the obvious problem is in the infrastructure part. The supply chain thing is you're going to have to charge these trucks. Now, if we've been paying attention to the ports out in L.A., you know what's going on with the unions, and they've been renegotiating. Well, what happened? Well, the private sector said, we're going to go around that. We're going to, outside of the unions, rather, they said, we're going to go around that. We're going to send freight to other ports. If you slow it down even further in the California ports, you're going to cripple them. Those companies are going to go under.
86690 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley. I'm Gary McNamara. Sorry, I'm just laughing at this. Andrew McCarthy yesterday such a New York Times headline. This is his entire article. No further comment necessary. I'll just quote the New York Times headline.
All right.
Highways have sliced through city after city. Can the U.S. undo the damage? That's the entire column.
Right.
I'm just gonna.
That's it.
I'm just gonna put the headline down.
Yep.
Highways have sliced through city after city. Can the U.S. undo the damage?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the next thing.
I suggest Chicago and New York without any highways going in.
Well,
that will solve
Yeah.
nothing.
Exactly. Well, no. I mean, what's the next step? If you want to control the means of production and the capital, you got to control access as well, right?
Yes.
So tear down the highways.
Top of the hour news is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America we are. He is Eric Harley and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome to Red Eye Radio for this Friday. So I was thinking as we were looking at that headline there from Andrew McCarthy, it's this headline, such a New York Times headlines. No further comment is necessary. I'll just quote the headline. Highways have sliced through city after city. Can the U.S. undo the damage?
Well, but that really is it. You can, once you control the means of production in the capital, you got to control access. Because you think about, like, the interstate system. What was it about? Well, it was about commerce. It was about access. It was about
national defense.
National defense, being able to get, if we have to deploy or if we have to defend our homeland.
And the ability to move parts and weapons.
Part of that actually came from Harvey Firestone. And when he was in World War I and he was seeing how supplies and equipment and everything was moved. And, wow, what if we had actual good roads? And then eventually you saw the interstate system come about years later. Well, now, the idea is, well, we can't have all these highways. We can't have all these. How can we undo it? We should undo all of this.
I can expand on this.
Yeah.
Homes. Have popped up in city after city.
Oh, yeah.
Millions of homes. How can the U.S. undo the damage?
No.
Skyscrapers have popped up city after city. Can the U.S. undo the damage?
Right.
Electrical lines all over. They cover an entire city. How can we undo the damage? People all over the cities. How can we get rid of them and undo the damage?
No, that's finally what it gets to. All these people, and that's where the left is. They've been here for a while. Let's all get into a tiny home. No, thanks.
Oh.
I'm not tiny. I'm not getting into a tiny home. I have trouble getting into my large home.
I do find it fascinating. And I did for a time on YouTube. Was just obsessed with watching the people that have done that. Now, understand that I watch a lot of things that I will never do in my life. But there's a great curiosity about people that do things that I would never do. And I'm not looking at it from a critical way. I'm looking at it, why are they doing that?
Well, I mean, if they say, look, this guy took one of those, 30-gallon totes you buy at Home Depot and turned it into a home. Man, you've got my attention. This is what it comes down to, is that, and I was telling you, I was reading a review in Wall Street Journal. The Rivian SUV, the R1S, which is the SUV version of the R1T, their truck. Mm-hmm. Well, the reviewer makes the points. Performance-wise, to me, the technology is wow, right? Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about practicality,
right?
Because we talk about the government mandates and subsidies and everything else. If they become this tested version, by the way, $100,000, $99,350, according to the reviewer. And he, as he's reviewing it, he says basically it, and he used the phrase, if I win the lotto, it basically worked its way up this SUV that he was test driving and reviewing. That's what he does. Mm-hmm. That's his job. Worked its way up to his if I win the lotto contingency plan. In other words, I'm only going to be able to afford this if I win the lotto, which is the case for most people.
Right.
The technology, amazing. The truck looks, or the SUV looks amazing. I have a neighbor of mine in my neighborhood that has one of the Rivian trucks. They look amazing. The technology, amazing. The performance, you got a motor on each wheel. What's not to love? You can you can cruise at 85. They're all-wheel drive because of a motor on each wheel. So you can get off-roading a little bit. Are you going to want to do that? I don't know. That's up to you. You can treat your vehicle however you want. But most people aren't going to be able to afford it, and so it's out of range. When that changes, and also, of course, there's the charge. Because he said it can get basically 80% of battery charged in 30 minutes and 140 miles of battery charge in 20 minutes. Life is not always optimal. Well, it's not optimal, but it's a lot better with other forms of energy right now in terms of that impractical part of it.
In a competitive marketplace of vehicles, to have as a defense, it's not optimal, but what is in life? Well, everything is a comparison. Mm-hmm. You know, number one, the price for something that isn't as, if the cost is way over what it would be to get a vehicle that is more dependable, we're not talking absolutes here.
Right.
We're talking about comparisons in a competitive marketplace.
Right.
And so to sit there and say, well, I'd have to win the lottery and and nothing is perfect.
Yeah.
Well, no, if I have to win the lottery to buy something, it better be the best product on the market by far.
And practical in every...
And practical,
I wanted to improve my life, not just be cool. I need to know that it's improved my life in some way. It has made my life better.
Unless I win the lottery and I want it as an ornament.
Yeah, you can do that. That's fine.
That's fine.
I bought, coming up on 2 years ago. In August, it'll be 2 years ago, I bought a new vehicle. And it's the first brand new vehicle I bought in 30 years. I always bought and my wife just bought a vehicle and just, that's great. But the question is, all right, so what does it do? Well, the truck that I bought is going to allow us access to a lot more, four-wheel drive. And so, that's the idea. It actually is going to be part of our recreational time. And, you look at the practical, and there's nothing wrong with the ornament part of it.
No,
if you buy it and man, this is great. No. It's cool to drive, and it's within my price range, all of that. And by the way, there's some really interesting offers. What I notice, though, right now is the difference between the new vehicles, the offerings, and where the price points are, and used vehicles, because used vehicles have dropped somewhat. And it's interesting also how COVID put a lot of used vehicles on the market. A lot of people were working from home, so there's a lot of used vehicles that I found, anecdotal, but that I found in our area that have low miles because a lot of people bought them like in 2020 and didn't drive them much. But when you talk about changing the technology of the entire industry and mandating it, it's a whole other conversation. And it is going to break people. It is going to break industries, and that's the point for the left. They wanted to break the natural gas and oil industry.
I think it was interesting when we looked at last year for 2022 and the electric division of Ford, which has separated, their automobile companies, and they report differently.
Right.
And for every electric vehicle that Ford made, they lost 34,000. And those vehicles are way more expensive for a comparable gas vehicle. And they're still losing 34,000 this year in the first 3 months for the number of vehicles they produced for what they have lost. Each vehicle has cost them, they've lost $66,000 on every vehicle. The government, the Democrats in the government, wish to have you out of your vehicle, which probably costs the average vehicle comparable to an electric vehicle, probably is half as much. And they want to get you out of that. And you can't, and most people right now with the cost of new vehicles, gasoline vehicles, find the cost. Well, that's why you're seeing loans that are 7-8 years.
Yeah.
Right now, because people can't afford, they can't afford them unless they make the payment.
Right.
And the Democrats wish to ban those vehicles and force you into an electric vehicle that they know you can't afford. Yeah. And the point is, that's not even including the loss of, you're actually not paying full price for those vehicles, even if you take the subsidies away, because these automobile companies are still losing money on them.
Right.
So if you ever want to get to the point, so the entire thing is a house of cards. You want a house of cards, you have one right there with electric.
That's it.
With electric vehicles.
That's it.
And looking, because we had mentioned the port trucks, it was really an interesting article, Dominic Pino in National Review. Electric trucks are worse than diesel vehicles, and talks about the port trucks that they want all in, completely in California by 26. Price: the electric port vehicle cost twice as much as diesel trucks. Refueling: filling up a diesel truck takes 15 minutes. Recharging an electric truck takes hours. Infrastructure: California needs 11.6 gigawatts of new electric capacity by 2026 to meet the needs of its electrification mandates. How are they going to get it?
Yeah, right.
Weight: electric trucks are heavier than diesel. Capacity: as a consequence of being heavier, electric trucks can't carry as much freight as diesel trucks. The head of the Trade Association for California Truckers says the companies will need to double the size of their fleets just to haul the same amount of freight they currently do. Costs: as a result of being worse at moving stuff, electric trucks will impose higher costs throughout the supply chain than diesel trucks do, which could raise consumer prices.
Yep.
Will raise consumer prices.
No, it will, yeah.
Freight will go up. They'll pass it on somehow.
They have to.
And if they have double the fleet if they have to have double the fleet of trucks that cost double the amount, they're not going to eat it.
No.
And so when you look at this, and remember, how has the left promoted this? You're going to save billions of dollars with these electric vehicles. They're lying. Ask the question, why are they lying to you about it?
If you looked at the average fleet ROI, and I haven't, but I know people are working on that right now, of this idea alone, that ROI is going to be far down the road. For the average fleet, buying the trucks and then having to double your fleet. My gosh, I can't imagine.
And when we first started talking this, remember, we don't get it anymore. The criticism from the left, this was their early talking points, which was, why are you guys against new technology?
No, the technology is fine.
We're not against new technology.
It's not efficient.
Yeah, it's not efficient. It's not productive for the average person.
Right.
And the government should not be forcing on the people of the United States things that they can't afford and taking away things that they can afford. It's that simple.
Yep.
And we don't believe that the government's job is to subsidize products that the public is not asking for. and is not going to solve any of the problems that they claim it's going to solve
and
to begin with.
And on top of that, we delay the greater efficiency of a private sector in their offerings. If you take the government completely out of the equation on mandates and subsidies, what do you have? You have a very competitive marketplace with EVs. They're going to have to figure it out, how to make it practical. And if they don't, they don't. But it's on them. It's not on the American people.
How many you might have a couple of boutique makers of electric vehicles to sell as ornaments to the rich if the mandates didn't exist.
Yeah, if the mandates are gone.
If the mandates and the subsidies were gone.
Yeah. Well, because it's always going to be trendy in a state like California.
And it's not just the subsidies at the final selling point.
Right.
It's the subsidies that these companies get. Tesla for their, company outside of Buffalo where they paid $1 for an entire massive billion-dollar plant that the government subsidized for them. That's before you even get to the other subsidies.
Right.
There's nothing like, when they go, well, the oil companies don't get subsidies like that at all. Not even close to anything like that. And the subsidies they get are more tax breaks and not outright subsidies.
Right.
The only subsidy they really get is for mixing ethanol in, which comes from a government mandate.
Right, which we're also against.
Yeah.
And so, this is the thing. They need to make it trendy. They need to make it, hip and cool, and then get the political consensus behind them from the rank and file. But that threshold is where you start getting closer to a mandate, and people realize there's absolutely no way we're going to be able to afford this.
866-90 Red Eye.
Surviving and thriving as an owner-operator has just as much to do with managing costs as it does with generating revenue. Like the chief financial officer of any company, you have to be concerned about rising costs, especially without increases in revenue. Trying to reduce costs, let alone make sense of them, can be a complicated task. Understanding basic principles of operating costs can save you thousands of dollars a year. A penny saved could be $1,000 earned. Saving just 1 penny per mile over 100,000 miles driven annually will deliver $1,000 to the bottom line at the end of the year. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Shell Rotella. Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara, 866-90 Red Eye. I just wanted to get to this story here. All right, this is going to get interesting. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer says an informant file that he is seeking from the FBI links President Biden to a $5 million bribery scheme while he was vice president. Comer revealed the size of the alleged bribe for the first time on Wednesday in a letter to FBI Director Christopher Wray, threatening him with contempt proceedings if he doesn't share the file pursuant to a May 3rd subpoena, saying, look, this is not a classified document. And he was making the point yesterday, and this is the point that we had made earlier, we're the elected representatives of the people.
Yeah.
This is not a classified document. It's alleging there's a crime that you're not prosecuting. We get this.
But in the era of weaponizing the Justice Department, when they can go after parents for showing up at a school board meeting and then labeling them as terrorists, it should be no shock that they just shut oversight, our eyes, out of the picture completely.
The informant tip is dated June 30th, 2020. Comer wrote, an additional clue in the mysterious allegation that triggered a guessing game due to the Biden's family extensive consulting work in countries where then the vice president held sway. In a remarkable coincidence, I feel there is some editorial comments here. Sarcastic.
Yeah.
Sarcastic. In a remarkable coincidence, Ukrainian officials held a press conference in Kyiv on June 13th, 2 weeks before the tip, 17 days before the FBI tip, where they showed off $5 million in cash allegedly offered as a bribe to end the investigation of the natural gas company Burisma's founder. We'll have more on that coming up.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Well, at least if you pay attention to the polling, what we have heard, you and I as talk show hosts, of feedback we have gotten for the last, since we've been talk show hosts, is that the news doesn't get out because the media is biased, and therefore the news never gets out.
Right.
And we had said a few years back, no, actually the networks are not nearly as powerful as they used to be because the internet exists. And when you see some of the polling, almost 2/3 believe that the Trump-Russia smear was a hit job, was a political hit job from the Democrats, the Hillary campaign. People know now. Yeah. And it's funny because this wasn't, I wonder how long they've known, because I know I've talked to people in the last couple of years, and we'll bring it up and tell them, well, here's what happened. And they look at you like, are you an alien?
Their eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
We've talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you from? But they apparently know now, where you've got almost 2/3 believe, and a majority want the involved FBI officials prosecuted.
Well, what's interesting is the conversation has changed, I would say, I don't know, over the last year or two, but certainly since, I think, the Durham report. One of the things that's changed is the mainstream conversation about it. Not just since the Durham report, even before the Durham report, you had podcasts like Joe Rogan talking about it. And the reason that's important is because if you get on the real wonkish podcasts or broadcasts, then that's a specific audience, right? And then you get out into the mainstream stuff, and that's where other people learn about it. Then all of a sudden, they're having a conversation about it. They may not go into the same level of detail that we did, but we've been following it since the very beginning. And the idea is that conversation allows, at the very least, for that judgment. Is this a hit job? Yeah, most people believe. Yeah, it's a political hit job. And I think that is a pretty big victory.
Yeah.
Because if we're not, if there's obviously nothing, no more actionable items coming from Durham's investigation, and a lot of people will say, well, people need to go to prison, and look, we don't disagree with you, but you, in a situation like this, you look at the long-term ramifications. And when you find out the truth about how not just one person, but a number of people were involved and participated in the Russian hoax, that changes minds, and that politically is what you want. You want to change those hearts and minds because you want, and by the way, I have no idea how it's going to affect elections, but at the very least, it is an acknowledgement as to what happened. The other 1/3, I don't know.
Right. So 63% believe, 63% of voters told Rasmussen they believe the Trump-Russia narrative was a political hit job orchestrated by the Hillary Clinton campaign. Well, that's the truth.
Yeah.
And so the truth, it took a while, but the truth is now out there. Probably what a lot of people heard was the fact that this should have never, the FBI should have never launched an investigation. There never should have been a Mueller report.
Right.
I say this, because we'll say things that we were right on, and you guys are getting cocky. But cockiness has nothing to do with it, and we're not bragging. In fact, I think we're doing the opposite. We may be attacking others for ignoring the obvious. It wasn't hard to. It's not hard in a lot of these cases, as we had stated from day one, which would have been January 2nd of 2017, where we said, what is this? What happened over when we were gone on Christmas vacation? We came back.
Yeah.
Think about that's over 6 years ago.
Oh, my gosh.
And we went, what the hell's going on? What's this thing about Trump colluding with the Russians? And from that day on, and if you've been a listener to the show that long, we said over and over again, nobody is connecting any dots. Right. There has never been a specific allegation. By the time we got to the Mueller report, there was no specific. Now you had the dossier that existed out there, and these allegations like the P tape and the prostitutes and all of that, but you never had what the collusion was.
Right.
You never had. Well, this is what it is. And by the time you got to the Mueller report, we said, this is a complete fishing expedition. They have nothing on him. It turned out everything that we said. I'm trying to, when Adam Schiff was saying that there's evidence of collusion, we said when he first said it, and then, he's most likely lying. Because if he had it, he would produce it. And he doesn't have anything, or you'd have the source stories that would come out, and the source stories that earlier came out from the Washington Post, and then we had all of those for you. We told you, and we said, well, you're going to have to do better than source. You're going to have, and we found out that was debunked all along, but nobody could ever get to what was the specific allegation of what Trump actually did specifically. You see here, for example, with Comer, you're talking about a specific bribe to Joe Biden. We know the money went to the family. Nobody is debating that at all.
Right.
No one.
Right.
And so, we had said it for years. People that were paying attention were saying it for years. Connect the dots on this because we don't see it, as we all know. And then as we went on and we learned about the dossier, and then at least a couple of years ago when, boy, the time just flies by, when we learned that the Hillary campaign, then we learned about Fusion GPS, the money going, financing the dossier. Then we found out about Iggy Danchenko and the Drunk Fest, where they really came up with the most salacious parts of it, the Russian national. And we brought you point after point after point after point as to the actual the two enterprises, the two major enterprises, which would have been the dossier and then the Alpha Bank theory, the Alpha Bank allegation that came out, that both were created by the Hillary campaign. And that's the thing. People look at it, and people should have gone to jail. Kleinsmith should have gone. Sussman lied to the FBI. There should have been, and he was found innocent. Well, yeah. And did you hear what the juror said? Well, there's more important things than lying to the FBI.
Right.
Didn't even deny the fact. Didn't say, well, they didn't come up with the evidence. They tried, they did it in a D.C. court, and boom, you couldn't get a conviction. But he lied, and everybody know he lied. He lied to the FBI on it. But people look at that and they see, it's sort of like influence peddling. You mean Hillary Clinton paid for and created a lie that they sold to the media, to a willing media, and they sold to the FBI? that actually got a secret warrant and it was all bogus? How the hell do you get a secret warrant with bogus information? The FBI's not doing their job. The FISA courts aren't doing their jobs, and this is something that we talked about this week that the Wall Street Journal also came up and said, the FISA courts talk about all these wrongdoings, but they're doing nothing to change it.
Right.
They're not upping their standards or demanding that the standards of the FBI be higher, and they're like, okay, if you're not going to do it, the FISA court needs to be gone.
Yep.
And then you find out almost 250,000 bogus things done with warrantless searches in 2021, right?
Yeah.
Or is it 2022? No, it's through 2022.
Yeah.
Through 2022.
Yeah.
And these things are just unacceptable. But with the Russia collusion, you think there was just nothing ever there. We could never connect the dots with legitimate evidence. They have with Biden. We know they took the money.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing is, Democrats' only defense is not to complete the sentence.
Right. Yeah.
With the evidence that exists so far, which is, Biden, Hunter Biden isn't the president. Well, we know that. Obviously, we're smart enough to know Hunter Biden wasn't the president.
It's not about Hunter.
But he was the one that got the money and fed it to the entire family. What business are they in? Why is somebody paying the Biden family millions of dollars? What are they? Well, Trump. Well, if there's something suspicious in Trump, we know the Democrats, obviously, they'll go after Trump when there isn't anything suspicious. So they can attempt to go after. They've been able to go after Trump all this time. But Trump's actually in a legitimate in a number of legitimate businesses, and so is his relatives.
Right.
But if you want to go in and go, well, that might have been, well, go ahead. They'll look into it. Senate can look into it.
Like Byron Donald said that day, you can point to the Trump businesses and say, well, I know what that is.
Yeah.
Tell us what the Biden businesses are of all of those family members that were involved.
And everybody knows it. Every Democrat knows it. Everybody knows it. And the polling is shown.
Where's the breakdown in the Barbara Walters style, because they would only do it for a liberal president, Barbara Walters style breakdown of, look at all these businesses his entire family's involved in. You're not going to see that.
No.
You know why? Because there aren't any.
That's why they don't. That's why they mostly have ignored it, and they can't defend it. So they figured the only thing we can do is ignore it. But by them ignoring it, the public finds out about it.
Yep. Yeah.
And you saw the numbers of the people that believe that there was, influence peddling. That's pretty high. That's close to what was it, 60, almost 70%? That believe it. Or no, I think it was in the same, about 2/3 of Hunter Biden. That's what it was. They believe 2/3 believe that Hunter Biden was involved in influence peddling. Or maybe it was like 63, 64, or 65%, and it was like 54% believed that Joe Biden was. It's like, so there's 10% in there that believe Hunter Biden was in part of an influence peddling scheme,
and it had nothing to do with
his
Joe
father.
Biden. It was just they wanted influence with Hunter. They wanted Hunter to do something for them,
right? which of course is just ridiculous. It's like, okay, there are apparently people that are ignorant as to what influence peddling is. 866-90 Red Eye.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90 Red Eye on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley and I'm Gary McNamara. So with the president not really wanting to talk about the debt limit and Democrats going crazy about it, and every single day you hear more about influence peddling, and that the American public in the polling, as we just brought you, believe that, number one, Trump-Russia collusion was a political hit job from the Hillary campaign, from the Democrats, and the vast majority of the public, roughly the same, almost 2/3, believes that, influence peddling was going on in the Biden family, one has to ask the question is, what the Democrats have to be looking at this, because the Democrats are furious at the White House right now. Mm-hmm. They're furious because there's no leadership at all in the debt limit. He has, the president has the biggest bully pulpit, and everybody knows it. And the Democrats are, why isn't he out there? And I think one of the things they're thinking in the back of their mind is he's not capable of being out there.
Yeah.
He can't sit and answer questions on the debt ceiling. It was when he was in Japan and he went through about that 2-minute segment where he could not keep a train of thought, and he was just reading.
It was horrible.
I mean, it was really, really bad. I think there's really concerns from the Democrats right now, and the Democrats were furious that he left town.
Yeah,
furious that there he is, because he's involved. He's negotiating with the Republicans. Well, I'm not really going to be there. I'll let other people do it, and then I'll just approve it or not. And they're furious because they understand how important imagery is.
Yeah.
And they're furious that they see the polling. They see McCarthy's out there every single day, and the public on the specifics of where, how we should negotiate a debt ceiling. The majority of Americans are behind what the Republicans are doing, and they're screaming every day. I mean, we were playing an audio cut off the air earlier about Democrats screaming about how it's Memorial Day and the Republicans are cutting veterans' benefits. There's nothing. They're back to just outright lying.
Yeah, right.
On that one, and
they want to cut money for veterans, old people, and children.
Right.
Yeah, same old type of lie.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across the USA and everywhere else. We are Red Eye Radio.
All over. The entire universe.
He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara.
The galaxy, the universe.
Memorial Day weekend is here. How do I know? Because I come out of my subdivision and it says, heavy traffic, heavy traffic, heavy traffic, heavy traffic.
Yeah, at the end of my block, event parking. I live near the city, the big city park that has, and typically there's an event on Friday, and I think Saturday they're going to have another all-day thing. But event parking, and then that pretty much goes on throughout the summer. Around Independence Day and Labor Day, I think there's a couple of other things, outdoor concerts and things they do. But yeah. Memorial Day in a big way, for sure.
Yeah, I go back to when I was a kid. Memorial Day was always. I was in the Boy Scouts, so we marched in the Memorial Day parade.
Yeah.
And then after, I'm going to guess, it probably started around 10 o'clock and went for an hour.
Yeah.
There were quite a few people there, though, and you would march in it, and then we'd be back by 11:30, and then Dad would get the grill out and soak the charcoal and the briquettes in gasoline.
Everybody stand back.
It wasn't lighter fluid, it was gasoline.
Yep.
And then he would take the wooden matches from 8 feet away, light it, and throw it at it. And
yeah.
Now, he waited till the gasoline completely burned out. I mean, it was everything before we cooked the hot dogs.
You want to do that.
But then we would always be back, I believe, by the time, I remember we would always be back, so maybe the parade started earlier, because we were always back by the time that the Indy 500 started, which was a huge event back then, and it was tape delayed on TV.
Yeah.
They didn't run it. They would run it in prime time. I believe ABC was carrying it at that time. That's what I remember. And so you'd listen to it on the radio.
Right. Yeah.
And I was, to me, it was the Indy 500 was always, and I remember my grandfather then went, but to me the Indy, I don't know why, it was always bigger than life.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the summer of '76. We still lived on an Air Force base, Laughlin Air Force Base, near Del Rio, Texas, and it was the bicentennial. So the base was decorated the entire year for the bicentennial, but that summer was especially big with, the parades. I think I would have been 10, so I think I was still a Weeblo, not a Boy Scout yet, I believe.
Yeah.
And we did our parade down near the flight line. It was the easiest because there was no traffic down there ever, usually. And so we did that. It wasn't very long, parade, which was great. Then years later in high school, the parades got much longer when I was carrying massive drums over my shoulder in the heat of Del Rio, Texas.
Well, that's because you couldn't play football.
Yeah, it's because I was horrible at football. See, you're not in shape. Here, put on these massive quad toms over your shoulder and march into Mexico. We actually would march across we didn't do the International Bridge. We did the Amistad Bridge, and officials from Mexico and the U.S. were both there. And quite often. We did go into Acuna, which would be where the International Bridge is. So that's a different crossing. But we did not. The parade was not on that bridge. It started. We did one leg of it in Del Rio. Then they took us on a bus across the International Bridge, then into Acuna on the Mexico side, and we did another leg of the parade there. But Memorial Day weekend, Independence Day, and other celebrations during that year, during '76. As a 10-year-old, I remember. I mean, I just remember. If you say 1976, everything for me is red, white, and blue because of all the decorations on that Air Force base.
And I'd be going back probably 8 or 10 years earlier than you, because I'm 10 years older.
Yeah.
But I just remember the death of the auto racer Jim Clark, which was huge news back then. I mean, open wheel was huge.
Yeah.
It really was. And NASCAR was nothing compared to
back then, right?
Back then, it just wasn't. And I think of the AJ Foyts, the Jim Clarks, the
Andretti.
Andretti, good God, and Andretti, Parnelli Jones. I mean, all these. And then locally, there was always a guy. There was a guy who basically I don't know if he owned it or his name was attached to it, by the name of Jim Hurtubise, who was an independent, guy who would always get in, never finish, but you had someone of your own that had a tire shop just a couple of miles away, and you couldn't believe that he was in the Indianapolis 500. But the thing that really got me, what hooked me to the Indy 500 back then, was really encompassing. And as a Boy Scout back then, you understood Memorial Day. I, by the way, I went by the electronic sign in my town today, and they did not say join the Memorial Day celebration. They must have.
They changed it.
Someone
called them, I bet.
And again, I'm not going to get mad at people because I understand. I understand.
A lot of people, get that wrong. They're not trying. They're not trying to change the meaning of Memorial Day.
Right.
There are people that don't actively or proactively recognize Memorial Day. It doesn't mean that they don't know what it means.
But the what always got to me, what separated the Indy 500 from everything else, was the preamble. That you don't, I haven't heard the preamble done live in the longest time. They always did it on radio because and then when the race would come on later on, we might catch parts of it, but you were paying attention to the play-by-play on radio.
Sure.
When back then, everything was, on radio.
Yeah.
Everything. I don't even remember the last time I listened to a football game on the radio, but remember, the NFL used to black out all of their games.
Yeah.
Didn't matter whether they were, it used to be, well, if it sells out within, now all the games are played.
Yeah.
There is no even sellout requirement anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Back then, it didn't matter whether they sold out. A game, every game was blacked out. Every home game. And so, you got used to listening on the radio, and the theater, the mind was just great. But it was the preamble that related to Memorial Day. And I have it here. I keep it on my phone just so I can always pull it out on Memorial Day and read it to people, because it was always, when they would say this at the Indy 500 before they said, gentlemen, start your engines, or, back home in Indiana. I get emotional reading and hearing it today even. And it's simply the preamble that a lot of people don't know to the Indianapolis 500. On this Memorial Day weekend, we pause in a moment of silence to pay homage to those individuals who have given their lives unselfishly and unafraid, so that we may witness as free men and women the world's greatest sporting event. When they got to the point, and even now I get emotional saying it, that when they say, unselfishly, and then get to the part of, so we may witness as free men and women.
Yeah.
That you can go and just watch. And that, to me, as a child, and even that's something, because you go back, that I would have been 10 years old in 65.
Yeah.
So I was so I probably would have been 11. I think I was marching with the Boy Scouts, so I would have been 11 or 12.
Yeah.
But when I probably heard it before, but when it really had that impact on me, and I understood it at that time, and, you and I talk about, growing up when we did, and that my father would hold court. I knew at a very young age, and in Boy Scouts, you had to back then, I knew by the time I was 11 years old, I knew how our government ran. I knew the difference between the Constitution of the United States and the Soviet Union.
Right.
I probably learned it in school, but where I remember it is from my father.
Yeah.
And my father, talking to me about everything that we talk about today, why the United States is different, what you're actually fighting for, that you're fighting for a separation of powers.
Yeah.
That the wars that we have fought in the Revolutionary War, it was about creating something where you couldn't get a monarchy, where you couldn't get a one-party system, where you could not get, and we're seeing the problems today. We see what's happening when the bureaucracy gets too strong. You realize, from that time to now, and you realize everything that my father explained to me, and school did also, and Boy Scouts did, about why we are different. You see it right now at times actually in action, where the power base is growing in the bureaucracy, and Congress is trying to stop it down, and so is the Supreme Court. You look at, we talked about the decision yesterday, the 9-0 decision on basically what do you call it? WOTUS, yeah, but to explain it to everybody, because nobody knows what WOTUS means.
Water of the United States. Waters of the United States.
Right. And you can say, that gets sort of boring. Flooding, water, and property rights, whatever. But that's a critical decision on property rights and the overreach of the federal government.
And the misinterpretation of the Clean Water Act and law itself.
And it's extremely important that you had actually 9. It was 9-0, even though they disagreed with how far the federal government could go. That was a 5-4 decision. They were 9-0 that the federal government had gone too far.
Right.
And that is, that's, you see the separation of powers And the separation of powers is going to work in times like this when we view it as a crisis. That's when, and the Constitution may not work overnight, but you see it working very slowly, very slowly.
Right.
And as we have seen with the Supreme Court and the constructionists over the last couple of years, slowly rolling back what the left wants. And but all of those things, really, I was taught at a very, young age, so it was very important. So when the preamble of the Indy 500 came up, it meant something to me. I understood that when you put the country in the hands of the people through their elected representatives, that it is the highest morality that you can get in any type of system to run a society. It's not perfect. It's dirty. I mean, it gets to be dirty, and it's hard, and it's and the right decisions aren't always made, but basically it comes down to the fact that, hey, that's what we're about. And we've said this before, if the people of the United States don't care about corruption, then the country goes down.
We're at a critical time, I believe, and you look at the weaponization of the Department of Justice. You look at the approach and the overreach that we have talked about and what we just mentioned, the misinterpretation of law, but also then the distortion of the Civil Rights Act.
Oh, yeah.
When now the left is saying that anyone can belong to any protected group simply by saying so. And that means that those protected groups no longer exist. If anybody can just say, oh, no, I'm part of that group, then the protections are gone for those groups. And over again, we've seen this. I grew up with a guy named David, a friend of mine, whose father did not come home from Vietnam. My dad did. And I was keenly aware of that growing up. And David turned out to be an outstanding individual because his father, Lieutenant Earl Brown, and the tone that was set very early in his life. And also that sacrifice that lived with his son, that ultimate sacrifice that his son was always keenly mindful of, was something that all of us who became friends with that family learned about intimately and carried with us. And to squander that, to allow our freedoms to go away, is to squander that, and it is to say that those lives meant nothing.
86690 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. I was thinking, and whether when it's 4th of July, Memorial Day, any Flag Day, Veterans Day, all those days, I always think about the country. I think about the Declaration of Independence. I think of words like, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Truths. Yesterday, DeSantis talked about the truth. I have no idea who's going to win this election. But the fact is, I'm glad he brought that up, that basically we need to be the party about truth. Somebody has to be out there promoting the truth and talking about the fact that we live in a society that we don't give a damn about the truth anymore if it fits our narrative. That's a huge problem in any democracy. Your goal has to be the truth. It has to be. And I think that's one of when I look at the greatest, downfalls of our nation, jealousy and envy have always existed. It's still a huge problem that we have today. But the acceptance of lying not just by the politicians, but now the public, if it fits a particular goal of the public, has to stop. That will destroy the country. There have to be people that are seeking the truth.
We've seen how dangerous it is because it leads to, if you don't care about the truth, then you don't care about the Justice Department being weaponized. You don't care about them coming after you. If you don't care about the Russian hoax, then you don't care if they come after you. If they'll do that to somebody who's globally famous, then becomes the nominee, and then becomes eventually the president, who won't they do that to?
The truth also expands out to when we see where we are today with liberalism, which is feelings supersede the truth. Sorry, we may soft sell to children what the truth is because they have young minds. But the whole goal is always in a free society to get adults to be able to handle the truth. It's what it's all about. It's not, their feelings are hurt, so line. And that's what we're being told in the liberal transgender activist movement, to defy reality. Reality doesn't exist. Why? Someone's feeling is going to be hurt.
You can't change the truth. The left believes you can change the truth. You can make the truth different. You can change the actual truth. You can't. It's always a lie. Always. The truth cannot be changed.
The Bonus Show.
And he's Eric Carly, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. So here we are at Memorial Day weekend. I am heading out of town in a little bit.
You're leaving?
Yeah, just heading to Tarpon Springs. Thanks I got a few emails from people in Florida. Hey, if you're down near Miami, give me a call. I'll have a drink with you. Hey, if you're near Daytona Beach. No, I'm in Tarpon Springs.
All right.
Outside of Tampa. Near Palm Harbor. So
this is the annual Gary, Jerry, and Mary get together.
Gary, Jerry, and Mary.
Your friends.
Yes.
Jerry and Mary.
Yes.
Now, anyone with a different sounding name is unwelcome. You cannot be a part of the group.
Right.
Larry? If Larry shows up, he's
Larry.
in.
Right. Another
if
Mary.
Barry shows up, he's in.
Barry, Larry. If another Mary.
Terry's in.
Terry would be in.
Yep.
But the name must rhyme.
And don't say, my name is Zeri. Nobody's name's Zeri. No. Get out. Get out right now. You're not welcome.
Don't make up a name.
Don't make up. My name is Wary. No, it's not.
And Jerry is one of my best friends, really one of my two best friends of guys that I know. Be Jeff and Jerry. Jeff I've known since I was 8. Jerry I met when we were bill collectors.
Yeah.
When we were both 18 years of age. And that's where I met him. And it's really strange that we ever became friends because, he at 18 he had it together. I was this little tiny nerdy kid.
Yeah.
They thought I looked so young when I was 18 that, they thought that I was just, one of the grandsons of one of the vice presidents who was just walking around looking like a little business person in a tie or something. They just, right. They really,
look, they dressed him up.
Yeah,
look,
exactly.
They put a tie on him.
They really
Isn't that
did.
Cute?
And for some reason, we connected and have been friends for the longest time. But and I've told the best story about Jerry, just so people know. And you'll say, okay, now I realize why you have a bond. is when we were. This is a couple of years after we knew each other, and we're still working at the bank, and I was club DJing at that point, and I had done one of my favorite stories. Also, very quickly, I worked at the disco for 2 weeks. I filled in for a guy, and he was a disco DJ, and I didn't want to do disco, and he said, "Come on, do me a favor. I'm on vacation. I want to haven't taken a vacation." I said, "I don't even know what to spin with disco," and he said, "I'll give you the list." I said, "Okay," and all I remember, I can't remember anything that I played except the last song of the night. The final song was always "Color My World" by Chicago.
All right.
It was always the last song of the night.
All right.
And I worked at a place called the Port Shark, and it had a shark's tank in it with a shark in it. But
a live shark?
A live shark, little live shark. And then the DJ booth was a shark's mouth. The shark's mouth is open. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I think this is right after Jaws came out.
Yeah, right.
The first Jaws.
Great marketing for that time.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And so the mouth is open, and you're sitting in there. You're in the mouth of the shark. It's a DJ booth.
We're going to need a bigger dance floor. That was the motto.
Yeah. I like that. That's great. and so that wasn't my scene, and I probably in my jeans and flannel shirt or corduroy pants and a flannel shirt or something like that. Yeah. But they loved me, and I just followed the sheet that they gave me, and he gave me a couple of sheets to a different order of I don't know.
Which is harder to do, by the way, if you don't know the songs. Yeah. Even if you don't like the songs, this is the life of a DJ.
And you had it, and it, the beat per minute thing wasn't as big back then.
No, it hadn't really happened.
No, it really hadn't. But you had to be able to still you had to be able to because it was a mixture of disco and then ballads back then.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you had to be able to talk from one level and, slow your voice as you went into
the energy had to match the song.
Right, yeah. Right. You had to sometimes evolve that energy, in the set. So you did have to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I did it. And they just for some reason loved me. And when my 2 weeks were over, they said, "Please stay." So What do you mean, please stay? What about the guy, Rick? They said, "Well, we'll let him go." And I said, "I can't take a friend's job. I just can't."
Yeah.
I just came to fill in. And
plus, corduroy's groovy. You wanted to keep literally. Groovy.
I didn't want to. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to spin disco. It just wasn't. Yeah. I wasn't into the music. The people were great. It was just the music. And I was working full time at the bank at that time, or not full time, but almost full time, and going to college. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I just don't. I don't want to do disco. And they kept upping the pay.
Yeah,
man. And they said, but if, you're going to make this kind of money, just let you know that you got to change. You can't be dressing like this. And I've told this story before. They wanted me to, and they said, we may help you with the clothing allowance, but what we'd like you to be in is leather pants with a silk shirt unbuttoned down to the navel with a gold chain with the shark's tooth at the end.
And you draw the line at the shark's tooth.
And the leather pants and the silk shirt unbuttoned down to the navel.
Oh.
Was like, bye. And so I was looking for another job, and my buddy Jerry said, "Hey, there's this rock and roll bar." He said, it's right near where I live, and everybody goes there. It's a real popular place. They're looking for a DJ.
Yeah.
And this was rock, though. Back then, whatever the rock was at the time in the mid-70s rock, classic rock is really, it was being played at that time.
So it wasn't classic yet, but yeah, it was rock. Yeah. It's just called rock.
No, classic rock was Elvis.
Yeah.
And Buddy Holly back then.
Tommy Dorsey.
Benny Goodman. Yeah, okay, let's go back further. And I didn't go back far enough.
Yeah, right.
And so I said, yeah. And so I went in and interviewed, and they said, okay, we're going to test you out like on a Friday night, midnight to 1 a.m. You get in there.
It's a horrible time to work.
I don't think they paid me. It was just an audition.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
And so And so I said, all right. And so apparently I was able to wear my flannel shirt and my and my corduroy pants, and nobody cared.
Right.
But, I went in there, and the DJ booth was behind. The bar was like L-shaped, and I was right at the corner, right there above the bar. You go back through the side that way. And so it was really...
did you say the bar was Al Sharpton? What did you say? What?
Was L-shaped. And you're just right up there at the corner, and so half the bar is one side of you and the other side of you, and you're looking down upon everybody up probably about 8 feet in the air looking down.
Yeah.
So I get in there, and remember, we're on the Canadian border, so I thought the perfect song, and you hear it at hockey games all the time across the country, was the Canadian band Trooper, Raise a Little Hell. Well, I mean, it's midnight. That's what I'm going to play. Raise a Little Hell. I mean, and so I go in there, and, Jerry's there, and, he's there to support me and everything else. And whatever I say, and I go into song Raise a Little Hell.
This is your big debut.
My big debut. I come on and I say whatever I said and went into the song Raise a Little Hell, and it starts going very clearly. You can hear Raise a Little Hell, Raise a Little Hell. The place goes bonkers. I mean, absolutely bonkers. People are going crazy. They're jumping up and down. They're screaming.
Throwing napkins.
Throwing napkins, probably throwing shot glasses. I mean, they were absolute.
There was silk and chartreuse everywhere.
That's where I saw the worst fight ever, and it was between two women with long fingernails.
Wow.
Bloody faces. That was the worst fight I ever saw. But this went on for an hour. They never stopped. The entire time, people were going crazy. Well, I get off there, and the owner comes up to me and the manager. They say, "You are the best damn DJ we've ever seen, ever heard in our lives. Nobody has ever gotten that kind of response." Well, I'm flying on cloud nine. I'm just like, wow, this is just great.
Because that kind of response sends people immediately to the bar.
Yes, exactly.
When the energy goes up in the room, people start drinking heavily.
Like they were all over the place.
Yeah, that's why club owners
people
like that.
buying drinks left and right, whatever. So I go out there. This is my buddy Jerry. I go, I did it. And he goes, well, you really didn't. I go, what do you mean I really didn't? He goes, you owe me $100. He goes, for the 2 hours before you went on, I bought everybody in the bar multiple shots and told them when my buddy goes up there, go crazy for the entire hour.
Yeah.
That's who I'm going to visit. I owe him. I might never have gotten to this point in my career if it wasn't for that moment.
That's it. You got to swim through the silk to get to whatever this is.
So, like Joe Biden, we bribed them. But I didn't know. Jerry was my hunter, but I didn't know.
Jerry was paying them for access.
Jerry.
Listen, I'll let you even meet the guy. You just got to shout.
Yes.
Really loudly.
So,
okay, Hunter.
Absolutely true story. And it was the Rickenbach in East Aurora, New York.
All right. The Rickenbach.
The Rickenbach is
right.
what it is. It's still there. It's in some other, it's a restaurant now or something like that. But,
all right.
But yeah, so that's a true story.
Yeah. Does the restaurant have a dance floor?
I don't even know. The one thing I do remember is Tuesday night, and I didn't work Tuesday nights, but I remember Tuesday night was 5 shots for $1.
Yeah. Well, that's how Jerry, drinks were much cheaper at bars. That's how he could afford buying people those drinks that night.
Yeah, drinks weren't weren't expensive.
In fact,
not like
they
walking
would,
into
back in the day, they would do ladies' night. Ladies get in free, drink free.
No
cover charge.
Yeah, you're
and
right.
you drink free.
Yeah.
I've never put on so many wigs and worn so much makeup in my life. And I was in a rock band.
Well, where do you think cross-dressing came from?
Exactly. I'm just here for the free drinks.
Ladies' nights.
Ma'am, you need to shave.
Oh, man, I even think about the controversy now.
Yeah.
If you had a ladies' night.
Oh, you can't.
Could you imagine?
I think they outlawed it in our state.
No, I don't mean that.
But even if you tried to just have any promotion, ladies' night.
But if you did ladies' night, well, identify.
There you go. Because the first club manager that says no
Well, the club manager may look and go, you don't identify as a woman. You're drunk.
Yeah.
If you think I'm going to buy into that.
Exactly.
You can be whatever you want to be, but you're not getting a free drink.
How dare you? I'll protest tomorrow, but not before noon. I'm definitely going to be, because I am drunk, and I am sleeping in.
Right, we'll protest at 3 in the afternoon.
But 3 or 4 p.m., I'm going to be here with my friends.
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Coming up following the top of the hour, at least 1,000 Amazon workers to walk off the job in Seattle. Over what? Over return to office mandates.
Oh, you got to go to works.
And some layoffs.
Yeah.
So we will get to that story. And then the other story that came out yesterday, and we had talked about the finances earlier on of Black Lives Matter, but story out there, black activists are now distancing themselves from Black Lives Matter as the whole thing was built on a lie to begin with, as we've stated before.
Yep.
And now it's completely collapsing because those that actually created it weren't in it for what they claimed they were in it for.
Right. Yeah, the cause was never the cause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when the cause is a lie, and you know it's a lie, and you're raising millions of dollars, what's the point?
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting how so many things for the left are imploding, but not surprising. And we've talked about how corporations and individuals, organizations, put everything into something before they even know what it is, before you vet something.
Well, you're seeing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we'll get to the Target thing, too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. Well, I'm defending what we did, and at the same time, I fully support the LGBTQ.
Yeah, yeah.
What? Are you paying attention?
We're not going to do that anymore, but but we still, in our minds, are doing it. Well, you can't have it both ways.
Are you paying attention to what's going on in this country?
There is no win. There is no win there.
I'm going to attempt to serve the right and the left.
Yeah.
No. You know how you serve the right and the left? You don't talk about any of it. You sell your product. Oh, and did you see Troy Aikman's been making the rounds like crazy? People need to get back to talk about the quality of their beer.
Yeah.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across the USA and around the planet, we are Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Welcome to Memorial Day weekend. Didn't even check to see. I know. I did see the warning about the airlines over the summer, and the airline associations are saying, look, the major problems are going to be because of the federal government and the FAA.
Mm-hmm.
And then Buttigieg came out yesterday and said, well, no, that'll only be 5% of the problem. So this is like the pre-blame game.
Right.
But they're saying the biggest problem is going to be around New York City airports. That they're only at 51% 5% of the staffing requirements for air traffic controllers.
I don't know how you change that. I mean, the first thought is incentivize, but I don't know how you do that. Yeah. I don't know because
it's a tough job.
Well, it's a tough job. There's a lot of work that is required for every flight to happen. And who wants to do that anymore, right? There's a very severe shortage of workers in that industry right now. And I don't know. I haven't seen the numbers as to how many flights have been pared down, as they kind of tightened up those flights. There are very few open seats on flights anymore, if any. So the question would be, in that time period, a lot of this came from COVID, where people just left those jobs. They were, and didn't want to go back to those jobs. And that's happened to a number of industries, but it's been going on, for the past couple of years, kind of building to this point. And typically the way you would fix that is incentivize, pay more. But there are certain jobs that just aren't going to pay that. You get to a certain level, and you're not going to cross that threshold on certain roles within that industry.
Well, you think about it, because when you look at the story about Amazon, Seattle-based Amazon workers from the New York Post have plans to walk off the job on May 31st in an act of retaliation over layoffs and return-to-office mandates. At least 1,000 employees at Amazon Seattle headquarters will participate in the walkout, which was announced over Slack and email messages that were reviewed by the Washington Post, even though this was a New York Post story. Mm-hmm. We're really walking out to show leadership is taking us in the wrong direction, and employees need a say in the decisions that affect our lives. It's a one-day walkout to show power. Employees disgruntled over Amazon's return-to-office mandate, which took effect on May 1st, as well as members of Amazon Employees for Climate Justice, are partaking in the walkout, the Times reported. So is the Amazon Employees for Climate Justice, is this about the fact of having to go to the office is destroying the planet?
Yeah.
Because you have to drive or take public transportation?
Yeah, you just make up excuse after excuse.
Yeah. Not going to cut it.
No, it's not. It isn't. There are some, we talked about the IT, what's going on with the IT world. There are some jobs where you could say, well, those companies or that industry is going to have to come around. They're going to have to meet in the middle somewhere, likely, if the mindset has changed and they can't find the talent.
Or they outsource.
Mm-hmm. Well, you outsource, and then the question is the quality of the outsourcing and everything else. You're going to there's a great deal of negotiating going on with the IT sector and has been going on.
Yeah, I'm just talking about, I'm not saying it's going to happen, just throwing out the options that companies have.
And those companies know that, all right, well, as long as we can, those individuals can remain productive, we can measure that, and that's the way we'll do it. Not every company is going to be able to do that. And the companies that are saying, we're getting back to work, are looking at it saying, if we don't get back to working at the office, then we're going to be in a decline. That's going to be far less productive, and we can't afford that.
Can you and I protest something our company's doing by leaving? Let's come up with something that we disagree with our company. That way we can leave in the next half hour and get an early start on our 3-day weekend. Well, because they're walking off their job while they're, and I'm assuming they're salaried employees while they're getting paid. Employees based at Amazon campuses elsewhere in the U.S. are also taking part with reported plans to log off for the day after their lunch break. Well, without pay, are you taking a personal day? Do you expect the company to pay you for that? What's the deal here?
Right.
But when you see what we're telling you that you need to have more workers and not lay off, and we don't want to work at the company.
Yeah.
Those are things you didn't protest 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it's totally changed.
Now, there might have been protest if you were just laying off to outsource.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't believe that's what Amazon is doing.
I haven't seen that.
I've not seen that. No. Let me rephrase it that way. I have not seen even that allegation being thrown at them.
Well, I think what's going on with a lot of IT is the fact that the technology is advancing to the point that you're going to need fewer people in those roles.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the people that are trying to take a stand, unless you're part of a union, you're not going to get that agreement. And even if you're a union, you can't stop the inevitable. We saw this at Google. You're seeing it with pretty much any tech company right now. The future is changing pretty rapidly. And the number of humans that will be required for those jobs is dropping. The forecast for the number of humans, I saw an analyst the other day talking about it, saying, we used to think that, all right, this is where you go to school to learn this. And now it's happening, the change is happening so rapidly, they don't even know what to tell. I can't tell you what to go to school to learn. I can't tell you because I don't know where those jobs are going to be. There will be jobs. It's just changing rapidly. Which roles are going to be human, which are not. And I think that just looking from a layman's perspective, we talked about Google, the layoffs there, and what's going on. Well, I mean, that the entire equation at Google, you were building something that saves the user a ton of time and creates a much greater efficiency in a number of things, shopping, research, and anything else. And information, you guys knocked it out of the park. And how did you not see that being the next step? That those humans that were involved in building that, eventually that was going to be much less of a need. And here we are. That is the advancement of the technology. It was the entire purpose. Not to lay off people, but to create those greater efficiencies.
Right.
What did they say one time in the information age, and this has been several years, that today it would have taken you 100 years to gather as much information as you can gather with technology today. 100 years ago, it would have taken you 100 years to gather that. So
it's probably right.
The idea is that you're creating this massive efficiency. Now, if you look at Chat GPT, it's kind of the same thing. It's based on data input and everything that's available on the internet, which means it's not always accurate. And it's not always true. And you give it a task,
GBT,
do something with that information.
Apedia.
Yeah, exactly. Do something, you give it a task, do something with all that information that's out there.
You and I know how, just in our business alone, how technology has made us so much more efficient and productive. Mm-hmm. You know, we've talked about this before, how when I began in talk radio and up to the time of really probably 2000, 2001, 2002, it was still going to tons of newspapers and cutting out articles. Yeah. Remember that.
Yeah.
And, you know, you'd be doing a show and the information you'd be talking about everything you'd be talking about was 18 hours old. And now I can't tell you how many times I'll be getting ready to take my second sleep shift at 5:30 p.m. in the afternoon, saying to myself, okay, I got everything pretty lined out, pretty much in my head. You wake up at 10 and the whole world has changed and everything has changed. And you're scrambling, which is why you hear me a lot of times start the show saying, I'm not ready. And the thing is, it wouldn't matter when the show started. There's so much breaking news and so many different updates and so many different news sources and so many different angles and so many different stories that will appear. And you go, okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. And so when I say I'm not ready, it's not that I don't have enough to talk about. It's that there's so much information out there, you're trying to organize it in your head.
Well, it reminds me of the time we went river rafting, and where you put in right away, there is a pretty good rapid that you go almost instantly into. That's kind of like our day. Look, you're just going to, the raging river is there. You just have to jump in and get started. That's pretty much our job.
Let me ask you this question. Is that what is happening? That is, you and I, it's a lot more. Now it's enjoyable for us. We enjoy it. The increased intensity because of all the information coming your way and the work that you are able to do is in preparing to do a radio show is that much greater. Is that one of the problems that's happening in normal jobs? Is that because of information being so readily available that if you've been at a job for 10 years, that just the natural progression of it is you're actually doing 3, 4, 5 times the amount of work and you're busy at a consistent basis where you might not have been, that the quality of what you perceive as the quality of the job. I could do my job and relax and I could talk to people. And now you can't do that. Everything is intense, and it's more intense being there at work, and being at home is where you can get back to maybe where you were, 7, 8, 9 years ago. Just wondering. I don't know. I
think that the COVID era spoiled a lot of people, and they love the idea. I think they don't want to be connected to anyone. I think the virtual connection is the only connection that they want. They don't want the interaction anymore. I can get restaurant and groceries and everything on my porch by clicking a button. I don't even have to talk to the person. I can do everything, all my banking, by clicking a button. I don't have to get in the car and go do my banking. Why should I have to do my job?
Sort of like when I go to the store now and I'll see people say, well, if I wanted self-checkout, they should give me a discount because why am I doing somebody else's job? Where my response with self-checkout was, good, I don't have to deal with a human being. Mm-hmm. I'd rather do it myself.
Yeah.
So, there's those two different types of people.
We created all these conveniences, but we also created a mindset because the delivery thing was really ramped up. There were a lot of grocery stores that weren't up to the Amazon-type status. Now, on global delivery, they're not. But on local delivery, they're getting pretty close. And they did during COVID.
But is that part of it, like, for example, with Amazon, that, I don't want to go back because the intensity has kept to shorten it.
Yeah.
And now I can't tell you how many times it's like I'll order something at 10 o'clock in the morning and 1 o'clock, it's like, what's on the porch? Right. Oh, it's there already. Mm-hmm. Well, that didn't happen 8 years ago.
Right.
It was almost always 2 days or 3 days at that point. Mm-hmm. Has that created, as they're cutting back, because you can handle and do so much more with the information technology that we have today, that people feel overwhelmed?
Well, even in those service centers, the warehouses, they're seeing that. Walmart just announced they're expanding. They have 2 massive service centers that they're putting in regional form, and kind of following on the e-commerce side along with what Amazon did. Now, Walmart overall towers over Amazon, but in the e-commerce game, Amazon rules. So you create that business model, but inside those warehouses, the automation is incredible. Yeah. And so, they're creating those efficiencies, fewer humans. And you can't just demand that you have so many on site. Unless you're part of a union, that's not going to happen.
866-90 Red Eye.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on compliance, safety, accountability. To determine a driver's compliance, safety, accountability, or CSA score, safety event data is recorded and compared against that of other drivers. Drivers are given a CSA score, but unlike motor carrier scores, driver scores are only visible to enforcement officers during an audit. However, drivers' most recent 5 years of crash data and 3 years of roadside inspection data is made available to potential employers via the pre-employment screening program. So it's a good idea for drivers to review their online PSP record from time to time. A request for data review can be submitted via data queues to have errors corrected or to have a non-preventable crash designation indicated for a crash. In the event a current or previous carrier is audited, records on drivers with high CSA scores will be targeted first, but individual drivers are not subject to CSA interventions like motor carriers. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller & Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. When you were saying that, what was it, that 100 years ago, that
it would take you 100 years to gather the information that you could get in 1 hour on Google, I think is what they came to.
And you think, this is a thought that I got when I saw the History Channel had, remember The Men Who Built America? Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking at that point, which really started around, the 1850s when they're talking about the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. And I look back at that and I'm just like, wow, there has been a huge change in society, and people have always said, well, the public hasn't kept up. But when you actually look back to the 1850s and compare it to now, except for real estate, mm-hmm. there's the amount of land you own and the actual home that you live in, the size of it. Most Americans live like the billionaires of the 1850s.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Everything, because of technology and everything, the quality of life that we have, we live like billionaires from 150 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wonder what it'll be like 150 years from now.
Mm.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
And he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. We were talking about Amazon and the walkout they're going to have on May 31st. I almost said August. I didn't know. Sorry, I didn't know what month I was in. And I started thinking, there's another story out there yesterday that Starbucks has closed all of the Ithaca, New York stores that went union. 1 year after the workers unionized, and we talked about where the union movement is going. Mm-hmm. We talk about technology, too. With the technology that we have today, you're able to monitor each individual employee and what they actually do.
Even working from home, the monitoring is very, very close.
And if you can reward workers that do well and those who don't, it's tougher for people to want to be in a union, especially if they feel that they have their autonomy.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you and I looked at and this isn't whether you're pro or union, this is just This is just the reality of where we are today is what we're talking about. I've always, when I look at unions, my opinion's always been they're antiquated, and that's why you see them growing only in the public sector. And when you look at, for example, the Starbucks union, we've always had great doubts that they would work for really union reasons. One of them is too transitory.
Yeah.
People don't stay in those jobs long. There isn't, a place where, and seniority has also always been one of the cores of the union movement. Well, people don't stay there long. The movement is very quick, and it's such a highly competitive business where in a short time, like a year, if your costs go up, you're gone because of the competition. And in coffee,
Yeah, well, the service industry has been plagued with their own staffing issues over the last few years as well. And Starbucks is not exempt from that. Just less than a mile from here, there's a Starbucks down there that I remember at one point, and this was really outside of COVID, after COVID. They were still struggling, and they were, at one point, that location was closing at 5 p.m., and that went on for a couple of months. And I'm like, wow. Now, the morning hours is when they thrive, right? Morning, midday is really when they thrive at that drive-through. But they were having to shut down because they couldn't find enough people. And that's going on all over and in many different industries. And you talk about unionizing, as you mentioned, that's a revolving door industry. People don't stay long. You're not really meant to stay long unless you're in management. And even then, those managers don't stay at one location long.
And odds are management's not going to unionize.
Nope.
But when you see, and this, I'm not surprised by any of this, and they're like, well, there's been unfair labor practices, and yeah, you can charge them as much as you want with unfair labor practices. It doesn't matter if the store's closed down.
Right. If they're gone, they're gone.
When they're gone, they're gone. And so we've always had great doubts in just because of the way that technology is going and the way that you can monitor individual workers and the way that mass production, which, really in a lot of, when you see the United Auto Workers and things like that, mass production was what made it where you had a ton of similar jobs, where you performed one task all the time. And, it's a pretty monotonous job. But a lot of that's being taken over by machines now. And the jobs that are left are the technical jobs where you can be graded specifically by your individual accomplishments. And I've always thought that is why the union movement isn't what it was, is because the jobs have changed.
Yeah.
The jobs have changed, and the manufacturing jobs that you had there. Now, there's other places where it still has, you have, oil workers, pipeline workers. You actually have skilled tradesmen that are still, parts of unions out there. One wonders, though, with the lack of technical workers, whether companies will look at it. It's almost like when I talk about being in the radio union one time. There was a radio union that I was in, and it was, for all intents and purposes, useless. Why? Now I go, you're union bashing. Let me explain the story, and then you tell me whether I'm union bashing. They sat there, and there was a great big, brouhaha. All right, we have raised the minimum talk show host now in this town. This goes back years ago. Will make $36,000 a year. We've upped the minimum starting salary, whatever it was, 17% in the first year. So the minimum a talk show host will make is $36,000. The lowest paid talk show host in the market was $75,000. And so the private marketplace, the competitive marketplace, was paying over double what the unions were negotiating. At that point, is a union necessary? And so I look at that and I say, will that apply more to the skilled trades now that you can individually monitor them, and there is such a great demand and will continue to be such a great demand that at that point, workers will say, we don't need the union.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be change. The whole mindset of and the relationship between employer and employee is ever changing. But as we get more advanced, and those advancements happen on a quicker pace, then you're going to see that change. And we talked about it with AI and everything else that you have to factor in here. Then there's going to be those gaps where you don't have the right match for the number of people needed for these particular roles. They don't have that experience, and part of that will be because nobody has that experience yet. But that will bring on the demand to those companies to bring in people, as you mentioned the other day. We quite possibly will see companies looking to essentially have these either internships or on-the-job training ramped up to the nth degree, to the point where, all right, we'll hire you on, we'll train you, and that's going to be more important to a lot of companies than a degree that they get out of a classroom at a university. And that's not going to happen overnight, and it will happen in different areas at different times. But it's definitely, I believe, the potential is there for it to happen, likely in the next decade.
If you have work from home and that's growing, that is counter to the union movement, because there is no camaraderie built when everybody's working from home. Mm-hmm. That's another thought that I've always had when they look at the union movement. Well, wait a minute. The camaraderie of being in a particular workplace together is what bonded people, and it bonds people. I know. I, worked in factories, and that's what bonds you together is the fact that you work together, you deal with each other, you see each other, you gripe about the same things.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different mindset when you're not there. In fact, the only place where you see union growth is where productivity and efficiency doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And that's the public sector.
Right.
Where it isn't, the productivity and efficiency in all corporations, and with AI coming on, it's even going to be more. You're going to see a greater leap in productivity and efficiency that is demanded. Now, technology is, how the average person can handle, more of what's going to be thrown at them, because there probably will be fewer workers in particular, careers, but then others will be created. What they are, I guess a lot of it's still to be seen. Mm-hmm. But where you see, the only place you see the union movement growing is where you're not talking about what the original intent of a union was, and that was to share in profits. Mm-hmm. And if you go back to the labor leaders of for example, George Meany, never, ever thought that unions should be one of the greatest labor leaders, you could argue, of all time. Mm-hmm. Never wanted unions in the public sector.
Right.
Said government doesn't make a profit. We're only here to share the profit. And so when you see the only place where unions are growing is where productivity and efficiency is not the number one thing that they're looking for, and therefore the unions are there to provide a quality of life for the individual, because of the company only wanting productivity and efficiency, and you're simply you're simply another thing to get them there. Mm-hmm. Productivity and efficiency is not the number one goal in government work. And so that takes one the most important criteria of union right out the window. And the second is there is nobody making a profit. And so it may grow, but where does it go? It's completely counter to why unions were created in this country, the government unions that exist today.
Well, especially when the private sector competes with the government in terms of employment, they offer greater pay. That's the number one thing people are looking at. I do wonder what the mindset will be, because I believe it is changing already, in that people put the greater emphasis on, okay, what's my earnings potential doing this kind of job?
Right.
You can talk about benefits all day, and the private sector has to compete in that way. The benefits and seniority kind of thing that a union might offer. But a lot of people will tell you everything for me is about pay. And as long as the marketplace is competitive, job security isn't a great concern. Now, of course, a recession will change that temporarily, but it is temporary.
Well, part of the problems for unions is when you're not a union in a place where productivity and efficiency is number one, well, then you're not going to get it. And therefore, for example, let's look at trash removal that used to all be government. Mm-hmm. Are there many towns left in the country where garbage removal, or the garbage persons, that I always wanted to be the guy hanging on the back of the truck when I was a kid, that and when I grew up, they were all government.
Yeah. Now they're contractors.
Why? The efficiency and productivity wasn't there, and finally the taxpayer demanded it, and boom.
And I find, at least it's anecdotal, but in my town, since the contractor took over, the contractor works a little harder than the city when the city was doing it.
Well,
because they're bidding, they have to rebid on that contract over and over.
Not only
again.
that, I remember when I was a talk show host in New York, in the town that I lived in, they were only required to do a certain number of streets, and these people would start at 8 a.m. and be done at 11 for the whole day.
Yeah.
And that became a news story investigated. We can't have that. Now in that town, all the garbage collection has been subcontracted to private people.
Yeah, we used to have so many holidays where there wasn't trash pickup.
Yep.
And now it's pared down to essential holidays, the normal holidays, but not the other ones where the city had a lot more before the contractor took over. And if you call and complain, the city's sending that through, and then they're monitoring how many complaints they get about the contractor.
Right.
The contractor, they're going to hold their feet to the fire because they can take another bid. Right. They can hire somebody else to do it.
866-90 Red Eye.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Looking at this headline, beer industry in shock that Bud Light backlash continues as experts warn of supply shortages of rival lagers. Now, is it a Pilsner lager or a lager Pilsner? I just had to throw that out.
Yeah.
The entire beer industry is floored that Bud Light is still taking heat over its now infamous promo with the transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney, and the backlash has put rival beers in high demand to the point where there may be a shortage of beer.
If you messed it up so badly that your competition is having a shortage because they're not drinking your beer, I don't know how to measure that level of screw-up.
This is Red Eye Radio. on Westwood One.